Welcome to Evening Whispers of Love. This is a story of Alice, the younger sister of the beautiful and beloved Violet. Alice has always lived in the shadow of her sister, but now that some new cattle ranch hands have come to town, things might change for Alice, and her beauty and depth will be noticed by the only person that matters. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the love adventure of Alice. Chapter 1: The Quiet One. The town of Arroyo Bend rarely felt the weight of strangers. It was a farming town tucked between sun-warmed hills and long stretches of pastureland. The kind of place where dust settled thick on window ledges and every face was familiar enough to greet with a nod. News traveled on wagon wheels and loose tongues, and by late afternoon, everyone knew the same thing. Mr. Torrance's men were riding in. Nearly 20 of them, hired hands brought down from the northern ranges to help with the cattle drive before winter pressed too close. Extra men meant extra money, extra business, and, most importantly, extra excitement. By the time the first rider appeared at the ridge, doors opened along Main Street as if pulled by the same invisible string. Inside the diner at the corner of Main and Willow, Violet Dennehy laughed. The sound was bright and effortless, floating above the clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation. Violet sat perched at the counter, skirts neat, blonde hair pinned just so, her chin resting lightly in her palm as she listened to the men talk. "Well, I'll be," one of them said, boots still dusted from the trail as he slid onto a stool. "This town's got itself a treasure." Violet smiled, already accustomed to such things. "We do just fine here," she said sweetly. "Talking about you, miss." Another man chimed in, drawing laughter from his companions. A man might be tempted to forget his work entirely. Alice Dennehy stood a few steps away, refilling coffee cups. She moved quietly, careful not to draw attention, though it seemed she could have stomped her boots and no one would have noticed all the same. She heard them, of course. She always did. "She's the prettiest thing I've seen since Sacramento," one man said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Bet every fellow in town's tried his luck," said another. Alice kept her eyes on the coffee pot. She had learned long ago how to make herself small in moments like these, not out of shame but habit. Violet had always been the one men noticed first. Short and golden, full of warmth and easy charm. Alice, though only 2 years younger, was taller, darker, quieter. Her beauty didn't announce itself. It waited. And waiting, she had learned, often meant being overlooked. She glanced at Violet, who met the attention with practiced grace, laughing when expected, deflecting when needed. Violet wasn't cruel about it, never had been. She simply existed as the world seemed to prefer her. Alice slipped out the back door of the diner, the warm noise fading behind her. Across town, the blacksmith's forge rang with the steady music of iron on iron. Robert Dennehy stood at the anvil, broad-backed and soot-streaked, his movements sure and economical. He had raised his daughters the same way he worked his metal, with patience, firmness, and care. Since their mother's death years earlier, the forge and the livery had been both livelihood and refuge. "You hear them yet?" Robert asked without looking up as Alice returned. "Yes," she said. "They're already filling the diner." Robert snorted. "Town'll be buzzing for days. Torrance cattle keep every man busy from sunup to sundown." Alice stepped to the doorway just as the riders passed the forge, horses tired but disciplined, leather creaking, voices carrying with excitement. Townsfolk lined the street now. Shopkeepers, farmers, children running alongside wagons. A few men clapped hands together, already talking contracts and work. The livery would be full by nightfall. The diner would sell out before morning. Opportunity had ridden into Arroyo Bend. Most of the men looked straight ahead, eager for food, drink, and Violet Dennehy's smile. One did not. He slowed his horse just enough to glance toward the forge. Alice felt the weight of his attention before she met his eyes. He was young, early 20s perhaps, with dust on his boots and a thoughtful look that didn't match the rowdy energy of the others. Their gazes met. He didn't grin, didn't leer. He simply looked at her, as if surprised to find something worth noticing where no one else had thought to look. "Afternoon," he said, tipping his hat. "Afternoon," Alice replied, startled by the sound of her own voice. His smile was brief but genuine before he nudged his horse forward to rejoin the group. Alice stood there longer than she meant to, watching the men disappear down Main Street toward noise and laughter and her sister's waiting presence. Her chest felt tight, not with jealousy exactly, but with something quieter, a familiar ache she rarely named. She turned back to the forge, to the things that needed doing, to the world that asked little of her and expected less. Across town, John Carter dismounted and handed off his reins, but his thoughts lagged behind him. The blacksmith's forge loomed steady against the fading light, smoke curling upward like a held breath. He glanced back once, catching sight of dark hair disappearing inside. Not the girl everyone was talking about, but the one he couldn't seem to forget. Chapter 2. What Draws the Eye. The church bell rang twice, cheerful and insistent, its sound drifting across Arroyo Bend as lanterns were lit and tables carried in from every corner of town. The social was meant as a welcome, both for the harvest and for the new ranch hands who had ridden in with Mr. Torrance's cattle crew. The church hall filled quickly, warm with bodies and conversation, the smell of baked bread and apple tarts hanging thick in the air. Fiddles tuned near the front while women arranged flowers along the windowsills. Everyone was there. Men stood straighter. Women smoothed skirts. Mothers whispered hopeful observations. Extra hands meant extra possibilities, and Arroyo Bend was eager to show itself at its best. Violet Dennehy arrived on her father's arm, radiant as ever. She wore pale blue, a ribbon threaded through her blonde hair, and the effect was immediate. Heads turned. Murmurs followed. A group of men near the refreshment table leaned together, grinning like boys. "Think she'll dance?" one asked. "I'd wager she'll have her pick," another replied. "Girl like that won't stay in a town like this forever." Violet heard them and smiled. She liked being admired, liked knowing she could be wanted, chosen. Arroyo Bend was comfortable, but comfort was not ambition. She wanted silk, not calico, a house with servants, a life that stretched beyond dust and fences. A rich man would take her there. John Carter stood near the wall with several of the cattle hands, nursing a drink and listening more than he spoke. The talk inevitably turned to Violet. "Torrance lucky we're staying near town," one man said. "Give me half a chance. I'd court that girl proper." Another nudged John with an elbow. "What about you, Carter? You notice her?" John's gaze drifted across the room, to Violet, laughing easily as a man spun her once across the floor. "She's pretty," he said honestly. "Just pretty?" the man scoffed. John didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted then to the doorway. Alice Dennehy had just stepped inside. She paused near the entrance, scanning the room as if deciding where she was needed. Her dark hair pinned neatly, her dress simple and well-worn. She didn't announce herself. She never did. Yet something about the way she held herself, quiet, observant, drew John's attention in a way that surprised him. "There's someone else," he said finally. The man followed his gaze. "Her sister." John nodded. "She's got depth. You can see it." The man laughed. "You're a strange one." Maybe he was. Alice moved through the room helping where she could, her presence unnoticed by most, though John tracked her without meaning to. When she smiled, it was small but real. When she spoke, people leaned closer to hear her. She didn't demand attention, but she earned it. And John found himself wanting to know her. The next morning brought sunlight and tension. The diner was already busy when Alice arrived with her father's lunch wrapped neatly in cloth. Violet sat at her usual place, chin propped on her hand, eyes bright with excitement she made no effort to hide. "You'll never guess who I danced with most of the night," Violet said the moment Alice approached. Alice set the lunch down. "I can imagine. Luke Torrance." Alice stiffened. "Mr. Torrance's son?" Violet beamed. "He's charming. Reckless. Exactly not like anyone here." "Alice, he's got a reputation," she said carefully. "Papa would never approve." Violet waved her off. "Papa doesn't get to choose my life." "You don't mean that." "I do." Violet said softly, eyes shining. Luke wants to leave. And I want to go with him. Alice's chest tightened. Run away. Violet laughed. Don't look so grave. I won't rot in this town waiting for a decent offer that never comes. Alice leaned closer. Violet, please. Think about Papa. About what you're risking. Violet's smile turned indulgent. You worry too much, little sister. The words stung more than Alice expected. She straightened, nodding once. I hope you're right. But Violet was already looking past her. Alice turned and left, the bell above the diner door chiming sharply behind her. Outside, John stood with two of the cattle hands, checking supplies before heading out. He saw Alice the moment she stepped into the sunlight, saw the way her shoulders sagged just slightly, the way she pressed her lips together as if holding something in. She didn't see him, but he saw her, and whatever had troubled her, John knew, without knowing why, that he wanted to be the sort of man who noticed when the quiet one was hurting. Chapter 3. Under the Same Sky. John Carter had never stayed anywhere very long. At 30 years old, he had crossed more land than he cared to count. North through Oregon timber towns, east along dusty cattle trails, south where the heat pressed heavy and nights never quite cooled. He had taken work where it was offered, learned what he could, and moved on when the ground beneath him started to feel too familiar. This time, though, felt different. The Torrent Cattle Ranch had offered steady work, good pay, and a sense, however faint, of belonging. John stood taller than most men, broad through the shoulders, built solid from years of labor. His blonde hair was sun-lightened, his hands scarred but capable. On the surface, he fit the part of a seasoned ranch hand easily. Inside, he rarely felt that way. He had been the youngest of 5 boys, always half a step behind, always watching his brothers find their places in the world while he wondered where his own was meant to be. He had wanted a wife for as long as he could remember, wanted a home that didn't feel temporary, but something never quite lined up. He didn't speak as loud, didn't chase as hard, didn't belong as naturally as others seemed to. The younger cattle hands respected him. They listened when he spoke, followed his lead when work got rough. Still, they exchanged looks sometimes when he lingered after supper, head tipped back, eyes fixed on the night sky. Carter's at it again, one would mutter, staring at nothing. But John knew better. The stars had always steadied him. They reminded him that the world was larger than fences and men's opinions, that there was order even when life felt unmoored. The town meeting was called just after dusk. Word spread quickly. Trouble in neighboring towns, livestock stolen under cover of night, criminal outfits moving farther south. The church filled fast, voices sharp with fear and frustration. Need patrols, one man insisted. Armed ones, said another. Make an example. Robert Dennehy stood near the front, jaw tight, listening carefully. Violet sat beside him, hands folded, eyes thoughtful. John stood along the wall, the air growing thick as tempers flared. He didn't like the noise, didn't like how fear twisted people into something harsher than necessary. When the arguing reached a fevered pitch, he slipped quietly toward the back door. No one noticed. Outside, the night had settled cool and clear. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled light. John drew in a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Then he saw her. Alice sat on the low wooden steps beside the church, skirts tucked neatly beneath her, face tilted upward. She hadn't heard him approach. The glow from inside framed her silhouette, but her attention was fixed elsewhere, on the heavens. Evening, he said gently. She startled, then relaxed when she recognized him. Evening. Meeting too loud? He asked. She smiled faintly. Something like that. They stood in silence for a moment, side by side, the sounds of raised voices muffled behind the church walls. You look like you're counting stars, John said. I am, she admitted, then hesitated. Well, trying to. I like knowing their names. His brows lifted. You do. She nodded, a little shy. Papa brought me a book once. About the constellations. I used to sneak outside after chores just to study them. John felt something settle in his chest, quiet and sure. I've always watched them, he said. Helps me remember where I am. Alice glanced at him then, really looked at him. You don't seem like someone who belongs only to one place. He chuckled softly. That obvious? Only to someone who feels the same, she said. The moment stretched, gentle, unforced. John made a mental note he would never forget. She looks up too. He didn't call it fate. He didn't need to. Some truths didn't arrive loudly. They came like stars. Steady, waiting, visible only to those who bothered to look. And for the first time in a long while, John Carter felt like he might finally be standing exactly where he was meant to be. Something warm and steady settled in John's chest. He opened his mouth to speak, to say something important, though he wasn't yet sure what the words would be, when the church doors burst open. A swell of voices spilled into the night, sharp and urgent. It's decided then. All men will take turns. Night watch and day patrol. We won't wait for trouble to find us. Lantern light flooded the yard as townsfolk poured out in a rush. Their fear turned to determination. The quiet was broken, the stars momentarily forgotten. John and Alice were caught in the current. A man clapped John hard on the shoulder. You're with us, Carter. Alice was pulled the opposite way, Robert calling her name as concern etched his face. She glanced back once, searching. Their eyes met just briefly. Then the crowd carried them apart. As Alice followed her father home, the night suddenly felt colder. Her thoughts stayed behind on the church steps, beneath the same sky she had shared with a man who felt strangely familiar. She pressed a hand to her chest, unsettled by the depth of the feeling there. Quiet, unexpected, and undeniable. She had never felt this way before. Across the yard, John paused, turning back as far as the noise allowed, his gaze lifting instinctively to the stars. She looks up, he thought again. And somehow, in the chaos of raised voices and looming danger, he knew this. Whatever was coming for Arroyo Bend, whatever storms lay ahead, Alice Dennehy would matter more than anything else. Chapter 4. When the ground shifts. A week passed, though it felt longer. Arroyo Bend had settled into a strained rhythm. Men rotating through watches at the edge of town and along the main road, rifles checked twice, lanterns kept close. Even during the day, the air felt tight, as if the town were holding its breath. Word had arrived that a neighboring town had lost half its livestock 2 nights earlier. No shots fired, no warning given, just gone. John Carter had taken another man's watch that afternoon, trading posts without complaint. The livery sat near the heart of town, and from there he could see Alice moving between stalls, brushing down horses, speaking softly to calm them. He told himself it was practical. The livery mattered if trouble came. But that wasn't the whole truth. Alice felt the tension too. The horses were restless, sensing what people tried to hide. She worked steadily, grateful for the focus, when Violet appeared at the door. Her sister didn't look radiant today. Violet carried 2 small bags, packed tight, her expression bright with a brittle sort of excitement. It's tonight, Violet said quietly. Luke and I are leaving after dark. Alice froze. Leaving? Running away? Violet corrected, smiling. Before Papa can stop me. Alice's heart thudded painfully. Violet, please, this isn't the time. The town's on edge. There are men stealing cattle just miles away. That's exactly why, Violet said. I'm not staying here to be frightened into obedience. She pressed a folded paper into Alice's hands. That's for Papa. Tell him I'm sorry. Or don't. He'll understand eventually. He won't, Alice whispered. You know he won't. Violet laughed softly, the sound too light for the moment. You've always worried too much. Then she turned and left, boots already moving toward freedom. Alice stood there, shaking, the letter crumpled in her fist. I don't know what to do, she said aloud. You don't have to. Right this moment. Alice startled, spinning around. John stood just inside the doorway. He hadn't meant to intrude, but there was no undoing what he'd heard. The worry she'd been holding broke free all at once. Before she could think better of it, she crossed the space between them and wrapped her arms around him. John stiffened for half a heartbeat, then returned the embrace, steady and warm, one hand resting between her shoulders. Alice breathed him in, grounding herself against his solid presence. "I don't know what to do," she repeated, voice muffled against his chest. "You don't have to," he said gently. Violet's grown. She's choosing her own road. Alice pulled back suddenly, cheeks flushing. I'm sorry. It's all right," John said quickly, a soft smile in his eyes. "I don't mind. Not at all." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I suppose you're right. She's always done what she wanted." Before either could say more, hoofs thundered into the yard. 2 riders pulled up sharp, faces pale beneath dust and sweat. "They're coming," one said. "Band of men headed this way, maybe an hour out." John's posture changed instantly. "You need to get inside. Somewhere safe." Alice shook her head. "No. The horses need watching. If they spook." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Stay close. And don't leave." She met his gaze, steady now. "Neither should you." Lanterns were being lit across town. Rifles loaded. Arroyo Bend braced itself. And beneath the rising fear, something else held fast. 2 people standing side by side, choosing courage in different ways. Chapter 5. What is broken free? The diner buzzed with uneasy energy. Lanterns burned earlier than usual, casting long shadows across the walls as men spoke in low voices and kept glancing toward the windows. Alice stepped inside, heart hammering, intent only on warning those gathered that the criminals were drawing closer. She never made it to the counter. Luke Torrant's voice stopped her cold. "Doesn't matter how much noise it makes," he was saying, seated at the back table with several men she recognized. Men she had known her entire life. Once the town's distracted, were gone. By morning, Arroyo Bend will be tearing itself apart. Alice stayed perfectly still, half hidden behind a support beam. "Your father'll be ruined," one man said. Luke laughed, sharp and bitter. "Good. He deserves it." Someone leaned in closer. "And the girl?" "My wife," Luke said. "She's ready. Bags packed. Waiting." Alice's breath caught painfully. "Violet," Luke continued, his voice dropping. "I found out last month. He's not leaving the ranch to me. Giving it to someone else, some distant relation. Can you believe it? I won't slave my life away for a man who never meant to trust me." "And the rest of us?" another asked. Luke smirked. "Paid well. Half the town's already taken coin to look the other way tonight." The room seemed to tilt. Alice backed away silently, pulse roaring in her ears. She slipped out the door unnoticed, the night air biting sharp as truth settled heavy in her chest. Violet wasn't just running away. She was running straight into ruin. Alice didn't hesitate. She sprinted to the livery, heart pounding, hands shaking as she saddled the nearest horse. The animal sensed her urgency and moved before she asked it to. She rode hard, dust kicking up behind her as dusk deepened into twilight. She found John near the tree-line, speaking urgently with other men. "Alice!" he barked when he saw her. "You shouldn't be here." "They helped them," she said breathlessly. "Luke Torrant, he helped the criminals. Half the town's been paid. Violet's with him. He plans to ruin his father and flee tonight." John went still. Every piece clicked into place. "Stay back," he said instinctively. "No," Alice said firmly. "You needed to know." He looked at her. Really looked, and nodded once. "All right, stay here. In the trees. Don't move." They stepped aside, the forest swallowing them in shadow. Crickets began their chorus as night claimed the land. John turned to her then, emotion breaking through his steady calm. "You were brave tonight." Alice shook her head, tears threatening. "I'm terrified." "So am I," he admitted softly. The honesty undid her. She reached for him, and this time he didn't hesitate. Their first kiss was quiet, reverent, born of fear, trust, and something deeper than either had words for. When they parted, John rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply, as if it had always been true. Alice felt it settle into her bones, undeniable and sure. "I love you too." In the distance, a lantern flared, then another. The night was moving, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 6. What Survives the Fire. The forest grew quiet after midnight. The fire had burned low, and Alice slept at last, curled on a blanket John had spread beneath the trees. Exhaustion had taken her where fear could not, her breathing slow and even beneath the stars she loved. John watched her for a long moment, memorizing the sight of her, safe, for now. Then he stood. "I'll be back," he murmured, though she could not hear him. He rode toward town alone. Arroyo Bend was no longer holding its breath. It was breaking. Smoke drifted through the streets. Lantern glass lay shattered. Horses screamed in distant paddocks, and the air smelled of gunpowder and fear. John moved carefully, keeping to shadow, slipping through alleyways until he reached the livery. It had been torn apart. Stalls stood open, tacks scattered, doors broken inward. The town had turned on itself exactly as Luke had planned. John pressed on, dread coiling tighter with every step, until he saw the forge. The blacksmith shop stood dark. Robert Dennehy lay near the doorway. John dismounted slowly. The older man's body was still, one hand outstretched as if he had tried to reach something. Someone. John swallowed hard, removing his hat. He had known Robert only briefly, but enough to recognize a good man when he saw one. Anger burned clean and sharp in his chest. He turned to leave and nearly collided with Luke Torrent. Luke sat tall in the saddle, flanked by 3 men, his smile crooked and cruel. "Funny place to stand watch," Luke said. "So tell me, Carter, who are you loyal to?" John met his gaze evenly. "My moral code." Luke laughed. "That'll get you killed." "Maybe," John said, "but not tonight." Luke scoffed, spurred his horse, and rode on as the town screamed behind them. John turned and rode hard for the forest. He knew something was wrong the moment he reached the clearing. The blanket lay abandoned. The fire was trampled out. Alice was gone. Her scream echoed once through the trees, then cut short. John didn't shout, didn't chase blindly. He followed. Tracks led deeper into the forest, and John moved like a shadow, patience honed from years of travel and survival. Hours passed. The moon shifted. At last he found them, 4 men asleep around a dying fire. Alice lay bound nearby, hands tied, a bandana pressed cruelly over her mouth. John waited. Then he struck. It was swift, brutal, necessary. When it was done, John knelt beside her, cutting the ropes with shaking hands. Alice sobbed once, then buried her face against his chest. "I'm here," he whispered fiercely. "I've got you." They rode until dawn broke pale and quiet over the hills. Only then did John tell her everything. About her father. About the town. "But what about Violet?" asked Alice. "Luke's an angry son out to seek vengeance. But he won't harm Violet. I know that. She will be safe and hopefully they stay out of these parts." Alice wept openly, grief tearing through her, and John held her without speaking, letting the tears fall where they needed to. "There's nothing left for us here," she said finally, voice hollow. "No," John agreed, "but there's something ahead." He took her hands. "We can go to Wyoming. I worked there once. Open land. Honest people. A place to begin again as husband and wife." She looked at him, eyes swollen but sure. "As husband and wife?" John nodded. "If you'll have me." Alice leaned into him, grief and love tangled together. "Yes." Behind them, Arroyo Bend smoldered. Ahead, the road stretched wide and unclaimed, and together they rode toward it. Epilogue. What endures 5 years later. The fire crackled low and steady, filling the room with warmth that had nothing to do with flame alone. Alice sat in her favorite chair, one hand resting over the gentle curve of her belly, the other holding a letter already read twice. Outside, winter pressed softly against the windows, but inside the ranch house everything felt safe, earned. She smiled as she traced Violet's familiar handwriting. Texas is hotter than sense, but kinder than I expected, her sister had written. I left Luke the moment I learned the truth. When I understood what he'd done, what he'd destroyed, I couldn't stay another hour. Jerry is nothing like him. He's patient, honest. He makes me laugh. I think you'd like him. Alice exhaled, a knot she'd carried for years loosening at last. We're coming to visit, the letter continued. I want to see you. I want to meet my niece properly. And I want to sit with you by the fire and talk about everything we survived. Alice folded the letter carefully, emotion pressing warmly against her ribs. She stood slowly, one hand bracing herself, the other still protective over new life growing within her. Outside, laughter drifted in through the open door. John stood in the yard, tall and broad as ever, his blonde hair catching the late afternoon sun. Their 3-year-old daughter ran circles around him, shrieking with delight as he pretended not to be able to catch her. Alice paused, watching them. This was the life they had built. The ranch stretched wide and honest beneath an endless Wyoming sky. The cattle were healthy. The land was theirs. Nights were quiet. Mornings were full. She stepped outside. "John," she called. He turned immediately, smiling when he saw her. "Hey, love." Violet's letter was still warm in her hand. "You won't believe this," Alice said, laughter and tears mixing in her voice. "Violet's coming to visit." John's grin widened. "That's good news." Alice looked back at the house, at the fire glowing inside, at the road stretching forward beyond the fence. "Life is good," she said softly. John crossed the distance and kissed her forehead. "It really is." Above them, the sky stretched wide and full of stars, unchanging, enduring, and quietly brilliant, just like the love that had led them home. That is the end of Alice and John. Thank you for listening. I was a little worried there for a while when Alice was captured by the livestock thieves, but just like the hero he is, John swooped in and rescued Alice. I hear he also does the dishes and puts his laundry in the hamper as well. Absolute man. Stay tuned for more stories from Evening Whispers of Love.